Good evening, America, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. in the WiredToFishCoffee.com studios. Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News, and you can go right now to Wired2FishCoffee.com and get a fantastic 10% discount. All you got to do is use the promo code Just News. All right, we're going to begin tonight's show with some major breaking news, some involving Real America's Voice and Just the News. But before that, we may have to go to the White House during this show because there's some really big news, Amanda. The Ukraine mineral deal may be signed tonight. That's what we're hearing. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, mentioned it during the cabinet meeting. Tell us what you know.
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, obviously, President Zelensky was facing a fair amount of pressure by his home country to actually get this done. And in the interim, ever since this first came on the president's purview, there were other nations who were stepping in and saying, well, maybe we can work out a minerals deal with you. So I think the pressure was definitely on for Ukraine, and President Trump was able to I think there is an amount of fidelity that President Trump had to that original deal, and it's something similar to what we saw with his trade announcement, that for those who were willing to come to the table and work with President Trump, he rewarded them. He kept his word on that, and he kept his word on honoring this commitment and continuing to work through the negotiations, which were long.
There's a lot of movement. I mean, nothing is sure in that region, especially with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. And all the distrust between their countries. But there is the offer of a ceasefire from Putin that seems real. Zelensky signing the deal. There's just some signs we're going to keep close on it. If the president comes out to announce that that deal is signed, we will break away and go to that. I want to turn to some other news that's a little bit more in our backyard.
I like it.
Amanda, tomorrow night, you and I are going to host the first ever American Border Heroes Awards right here in this studio on this great network, Real America's Voice. Just the News, Real America's Voice, and the American Border Story Project. A fantastic group of people are going to be here. We're going to have 21 families who lost loved ones to border crimes during the Biden years here. We're going to have the border czar, Tom Homan. He's going to be one of the awardees. We're going to give that up early. We've got other major award winners, also some scholarships that are going to honor some of the victims we've got to know all too painfully well. People like Rachel Morin and Jocelyn Ungary, and of course, Laken Riley. So we're going to get to that tomorrow night. 2 nights we're going to do this. We're going to break the award show into 2 nights. First night honoring people on the front lines of the border who've closed it since Donald Trump came in and who got through the Biden years by protecting us as best they could. And then on day 2, the families. We're never going to forget the names, the stories, the failures that led to one of the greatest and most embarrassing tragedies in American history. Another thing I want to get to while we're on the topic of border security, Amanda, we were first. I know Fox News is crowing about it now, but Just the News broke this 4 hours ago, that there is a second and new and disturbing domestic abuse complaint and restraint order that Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife filed against them. Not in 2021, that's the one we broke 2 weeks ago. This one occurred in 2020. Jaw-dropping allegations, including that Abrego Garcia took his wife and pulled her out of the car by his hair, dragged her across the street by her hair, hit her, broke the children's toys, locked the children into a room, and also, according to the wife's own account, to a court, meaning that she told us under penalty of lying to a court, he told her that he could kill her and no one would ever find her or he'd ever be held accountable. All of that up at justthenews.com, broke about 3 hours ago. Stephen Richards, our great colleague, had that. This is a guy that Democrats were trying to lionize. Got a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, the running narrative was that this was a devoted father and husband from Maryland, and he, in fact, is not from Maryland at all. He's from El Salvador. He was living there illegally. I would like to say that this is a shock, but you typically find in these domestic abuse situations that it is recidivistic behavior. Yeah,
I think it's right. Well, now you got 2 complaints in 2 years, plus the human trafficking allegation when he was stopped in the car, and his own admission he was here illegally. Amanda, what else is on your radar? You've been watching news all day today.
Yes, indeed. So I have a clip that I want to use. I think we're going to have to scrap my entire monologue, but I want to use this clip from Joe Rogan because, John, you and I talked about this heading to the election, how pivotal it was that Joe Rogan backed President Trump. He moved from a very, very far place to getting behind the president, but he has such a huge influence. He has, millions-wide audience.
Oh, yeah, and across many generations, young to old.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of the deportation process, he had something to say about that. Check it out.
Joe Rogan said this. Joe Rogan, one of the leading podcasters, Trump supporter, about the deportation of Venezuelans. He said, quote, rounding up gang members and shipping them to El Salvador with no due process, he said it was dangerous, and added, quote, we got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters.
I
Is
agree
Joe
with that.
Rogan right?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, we want to be careful, and we are careful. We're doing something that has to be done.
I think that was a good response by the president. We do have to be careful. The recognition.
Terry
that
Moran's
this-
response, he didn't expect that one coming. They're like, whoa, wait a second, I just got flipped on my script. Where do I go?
Yeah, but it was
it's
a great
funny.
response
It was,
because
yeah.
there is an amount of sobriety that has to be
Yeah.
utilized in carrying this out and making sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yeah, I think President Trump will get that process there when it needs to be in soon, so they can get the Supreme Court order lifted.
Indeed.
All right, we're going to have two members of Congress joining us in a little bit to tell us all the amazing things that have happened since Congress got back from Easter break. They're just finishing up voting. They're going to join us, so we're going to kick to our first guest today. Guys, if you could screen up here, we've got Brett Manley joining us. I'm very lucky to join us. Brett, you've got a lot going on in your world. Tell us what's top of headlines with you these days.
Yeah, hey John, appreciate you having me on. I mean, we're focused at the moment on, reshoring manufacturing, especially in the energy space. To that end, we had a piece out last week in the Examiner about how, bureaucrats connected to Biden are undermining the president's trade authority by using an obscure Department of Commerce process called ADCVD, where they file charges against their competitors and then get tariffs slapped on them, not from President Biden or Trump, but from bureaucrats at the Department of Commerce, ultimately undermining the president's ability to negotiate trade deals bilaterally with individual countries.
Brett, the conversation around critical minerals 20 years ago, I think, would have been pretty far outside our normal nomenclature. It is now a regular part of political conversations, and we now have that breaking news, of course, from just a little while ago, that minerals deal with Ukraine will be signed shortly, and we might actually go to it live. How does that impact the markets, and how does that impact the energy sector here domestically?
Look, it's certainly going to help. I mean, at the end of the day, we're one of the most, our country is one of the most abundant in resources in the world. The one thing we don't have, though, is the refining capacity. So we have a lot of these things here in the United States. And of course, if we can sign that deal with Ukraine, that'd be great. Greenland, another thing that's on the table. But we ultimately will have these minerals, and then we'll have to send them in large part to China to refine them so that we can bring them back to the United States. I think what the president can do here after signing this deal, invoke the Defense Production Act, cut through the red tape so we can build some of this refining capacity here in the United States. AI offers us a great opportunity here, AI manufacturing. These aren't jobs that we have here. We're not replacing anybody. If we can speed up the cost of permitting, if we can speed up the production of these refining capacities, and we can use AI, we can replace the foreign refining capacity that we're relying on right now. But without that, we're going to be beholden to foreign countries for quite some time.
Yeah, that's a
good
great
to know.
point.
Yeah.
It's one of the short-sighted problems that Washington allowed to fester for so long. But I want to ask a little bit about China and whether we can trust them in any future trade negotiations. We've had earlier deals. They were going to clean up the fentanyl precursor situation. They didn't really do it. We had a first order trade deal in the first Trump administration. I think Scott Bessent in the last few days said, hey, we remembered what they didn't deliver on that. We're going to consider that in the next negotiation. How do you see this unfolding, and what stick does President Trump have to make sure China delivers if they do sign an agreement this time?
Yeah, well, certainly, I think going into the negotiation, you have a president certainly willing to engage directly and carry a stick where his predecessor may not have. One thing I think, the administration should look for is, the Chinese really look 10, 20, 30 years down the road when they formulate these policies. And while the short-term stuff is great, we need to make sure that we're doing these things so that the manufacturing comes to the United States. Tell the Chinese, hey, we can do business, but you know what, why don't we bring some of the technology here to the United States? Why don't we bring some of the, the brilliant people or the smart minds here to the United States so we can have access to those things? If you want to sell into our market, you should produce those things here in the United States. Conversely, we really have to reward companies that vertically integrate, that manage their supply chains, that buy American. Buy American has been kind of a joke on Capitol Hill for a long time because there's always a waiver, right? Every time, there's a Biden administration famously constantly waived Buy America requirements, enforce Buy America requirements, because if you don't support financially the domestic supply chain, then you're never going to have the domestic industry.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I want to ask you about what a future China trade deal could look like and how friendly this administration is going to be to meeting needs. To borrow a phrase from one of my favorite shows, you probably know it being a thin blue line family, The Wire on HBO. Famous quote, if you come for the king, you best not miss. And obviously, China missed. Is this going to be a situation where the president and this administration make them pay in the form of this deal?
Look, I think the president has been engaged in rough and tumble negotiations his whole life, and he's got a strong personality. But everything I know about him, he's not a man to hold a grudge. Ultimately, he was elected by the people to do what's best for the United States of America, and that's what I think he's going to do here. And when he finds a deal that's good for Americans and it's good for the long-term stability of the United States, that's what we're going to see, which is really about bringing, again, manufacturing back here to the United States and looking forward to taking advantage of some of these technologies like AI, so we can really kind of cut through some of the competitive advantages that some foreign countries have, namely the cost of labor. There's a real opportunity here, and I think it's really exciting. And the more we can have those types of things happen here in the United States, the better we're going to be in the long run.
Yeah, that's a really great point. But I want to ask one more question, because I think a lot of people forget this, but just before Joe Biden's family got lucky with all those great deals in China on that Air Force 2 trip in December of 2013, a few months earlier, the vice president signed a memorandum of understanding with the Securities Exchange Commission and others too, that would exempt Chinese companies who are on the American stock markets from having to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a big compliance issue. Americans and other Western countries have to do it, but China didn't. That's the sort of deal that if things get tough in China, President Trump could rescind that in 30 days. That would get China's attention pretty quickly, wouldn't it?
I would think so. I mean, look, there are a lot of Chinese companies that operate in the United States, and they do so ethically and honestly, and they follow the American exchange law and currency exchange laws. Ultimately, the rules have to apply the same to everybody, right? So you can't be picking winners and losers, and that's what the previous administration did, is they really cozied up to certain companies and rewarded them, whether that benefited their family or politically connected folks. You saw it happen over and over and over again. So President Trump has an opportunity here to really make sure that the same rules apply to everybody. If you're going to do business here in the United States and you're not an American company, you have to follow the same rules that Americans do. Otherwise, what are we really doing here?
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's also a point that gets lost in the mainstream media every day. We got to keep reminding people that fairness matters. Brett Manley, great interview. Thanks for getting us up to speed on all these big issues. We're going to get you back on soon, because a lot of history is in the offing. Good to have you on tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, really great. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We now know we have Congressman Tim Burchett. He's going to join us in a second. He makes us laugh, he makes us think, and he makes us peer into the future. We're excited at that. But first, a quick commercial break. A few messages from our great sponsors here. Hey folks, if you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. When's the last time you checked on your home title? I know the answer. That's the legal proof, of course, that you own your house. If you're like me, the answer is never. The problem is, in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, your home title has been transferred out of your name. That's not a good situation. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property, and you're not even going to know about it until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. That's why you need to stop what you're doing and find out today if you're already a victim. Use the promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You also get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HometitleLock.com right now and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. And while radicals torch Teslas in a show of fury against President Trump's vision for America, the more serious threat to that agenda is unfolding far from the headlines, deep within the machinery of Washington. And it's not the mob in the streets, but the bureaucrats behind the desks who are doing the quiet work of dismantling America first under the guise of trade enforcement. They are now targeting the battery add-ons essential to Tesla's electric vehicles, an attack cloaked in policy but driven by politics. We're going to talk about that and much more. But I want to get to the breaking news of the day with our guest, a frequent guest here on the show who we absolutely love having here for his wisdom and his humor. Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
Sir,
it's good
I want
to see
start...
you too, John.
Sir, I want to start with the breaking news of the hopefully signed Ukraine deal that I think we're probably going to take live when it happens. But this is a big win for President Trump. He talked about negotiating between Ukraine and Russia on the campaign trail quite a bit.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I got hearing aids. When I hit 60, it all just fell apart. Um,
It was
I got
something
in the
important to
Bluetooth,
him on the
which is kind of
campaign
cool.
trail, and
But no,
this seems
yeah.
like another marker of that
Look,
success. Yeah.
this is all part of the peace process. I think we get invested over there. I think it's an incredible way for us to recoup some of the $250 billion. That's just, to me, is such a large number that we've given them basically unchecked. And I think it's time we're not putting down roots really, but we're developing a business interest. And two, it gets away from the Chinese. These rare earth minerals are so often done by the Chinese in poor countries, and they use slave labor. You see the pictures. I've seen the pictures of the kids up to their neck and some kind of fluid that obviously is a carcinogen. And we get past all of that, and we can start developing technology with this stuff. And when there's going to be an American flag over there and American businesses, Russia will not want to mess with Trump in the White House. They will not want to bomb. They won't be killing people around there. And so I suspect, and a lot of those areas are in the areas that are close to the border with Russia, right, apparently where these rare earth minerals are. So I'm looking forward to that peace breaking out all over the place.
Yeah, and you're one of the first. A lot of this gets lost in the conversation in Washington, but Trump is very tactical here. He knew that if you create the mineral deal and American companies start mining there, Russia's not attacking Ukraine anymore, it's attacking the United States. So it's sort of he thinks in 4 dimensions. You're one of the few people that recognize this and mention it regularly. He's got a 4-dimensional plan for this peace process, doesn't he?
I think he does, and I really do. I mean, he's playing chess, and the rest of these knuckleheads in Washington are playing checkers. They're on the floor right now, just disputing everything that's out there that Trump has done, and that's the Democrats' plan. Really, they have no plan other than to attack Trump, and nothing's working. They even when, shall I say, dare say, CNN puts out a poll and says that America is favoring our immigration policy under Trump by over 50%. It's a good thing. Don't read all the negatives. Quit reading the editorials. These are people that are angry with this country. They hate us. They hate everything we stand for. They hate our flag. They hate our God. They hate our military, and they want to destroy us. They're anarchists. They want to destroy it and create some kind of socialist Marxist woke-utopia. And they're the only ones that'll be able to prosper, and none of us will. So I'm standing with Trump.
Yes, sir. I want to ask you about another piece of this minerals deal. Our first guest tonight was talking about how, it's great to mine the minerals, but then you end up having to refine them in China. And we obviously want to break away from that, but we would have to build those refineries here in the United States. We happen to have a builder in the Oval Office, so that would probably work out, but how can Congress help?
Yes, man. Well, the good thing is who's running our EPA now is a great man named Lee Zeldin. Lee and I were in Congress together. I will say he's a better first baseman than I am, but I'm third string, so everybody's better than I am.
Tell him that too.
And Lee is he's a good guy. He's got a couple beautiful daughters, and I'm a big fan of Lee Zeldin. He is a no nonsense. He's kind of Trump-esque in his press releases. He'll call them out. Man, I love that. He doesn't let them, when they lie about him or lie about his department or his president, he lets them have it, both barrels. And you got some, and he's no nonsense. You're not going to take, right now we're looking at 30 years in Minnesota to permit these mines that have some other rare earth minerals that we'd like to get in our own country. And as it comes to find out, some of these rare earth minerals might not be so rare, but these so-called environmentalists, which are probably being funded by China and foreign interests. And that's the ugly truth about these lobbyists up here. They don't care where they take their money. They just want their money. And they'll put these arbitrary environmental laws on us that where we can't do things. We have to have endless hearings upon endless hearings. And then they drive it. There's no way for us to do the business. But guess where they can do the business? In China or in Central America, where China controls the slave labor market. So, this is a great day. I think Lee Zeldin he'll clean the field with this thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I want to talk a little bit about a storyline that Democrats and their media friends foist upon us for about a week or so, and that is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is some hero. We should feel bad for him. He's a victim. Then all the facts came out. We got a new story today. Second domestic abuse complaint earlier, 2020. Heinous allegations about how he treated his wife from his wife, how he treated his children from his wife. But it seems as though like about 3-4 days ago, the Democrats shut their radio off on this. They're not talking about it at all. Did they just get a dose of common sense, or did facts catch up to their narrative?
Facts caught up to their narratives. I told somebody I think they're doing their polling in the federal penitentiary in the gang wards because it's not sticking. This is not working for them. Their leadership up here sent the word out that was leaked out today that he said no more trips down to El Salvador. They're not letting anybody go south of the border. They're wanting this issue to go away. They got bit on this one, and it's because of folks like yourself and the independents out there and the people on the internet that just kept digging to these Freedom of Information Act. It really started really in Tennessee because he got picked up. Right. He got picked up by our Tennessee Highway Patrol, which is an incredibly patriotic group of men and women. Yeah. I've worked with them closely when I was in the state legislature for years, and many of them I've still got many friends over there. And they picked this guy up, and he had a carload of people that were obviously illegals, and he did not have a valid driver's license. And then under the Biden administration, their FBI apparently told them to turn this cat loose. And we're still not sure what happened there. And through Freedom of Information, we've come to find out this information through an outfit called the Tennessee Star. And so a buddy of mine runs it. And he just busted this thing wide open, and then it just snowballed after that. It's one of those things you hear the story and you think, oh, that can't be true. That can't be true. And then it just keeps snowballing and snowballing. And now the national media, they will drop this guy like a hot potato. You will never hear of him or MS-13 from here on out. It's Dem S-13 really. It's the Democrat Party has endorsed this guy, and clearly he is not a good person, and Trump did the right thing in getting him out of our dadgum country. He's home where he belongs in El Salvador.
Sir, before we get into President Trump's accomplishments in his first 100 and what he'll do in the next 100, there was another interesting thing that happened yesterday, and we're seeing a little bit of a cycle when you see President Trump come together with someone from the opposite side, and then they get photographed together, and now she has come to the Oval Office, and then she got called up yesterday to give some remarks. How close to being America First is Gretchen Whitmer?
I'd say not very close. I think she's feeling snake bit right now. Yeah, I mean, these people, how they gonna bite the hand that feeds them? It's so pathetic with these Democrats. They've got to have Trump. They got to have his support. They got to have the industry, and they know the working people are supporting them. Wall Street's not going to support Trump, oddly enough, since he is a product of Wall Street, but Trump sees it. But dadgummit, who does support him is Main Street. That's why you saw Hispanic folks, black folks, labor people, ladies like yourself, more so than in the past, have voted Republican. And it's because they see it. They're tired of this stuff. Like I said, they don't want Donald Trump teaching their daughter's Sunday school class. I know I don't, but dadgum, I like him in the White House.
So real quickly, because I think a lot of people are wondering, the second 100 days of the Trump presidency are going to be the most consequential because the arc of the presidency will be determined there by things that your own chamber will do. Can we get tax cuts renewed? Can we cut the size of government? Can we get trade deals done? The president seems to have 20 or 30 of those about to come out soon. Tell us what you think your institution, and I know you're always realistic about it. That's what we like about you, but what can it accomplish to make sure the Trump agenda keeps marching forward?
Well, I think we're going to start moving. Steve Scalise found me on the House floor and said, hey, Burchett, we're working with the White House. The president wants to see your bill on defunding the Taliban out. I mean, that's $40 million a week. The State Department said it's $5 billion. I think you're going to see more and more things like that come out. We're a party of limited government, and the big, beautiful bill is going to carry a lot of those mandates that President Trump has. But I'll tell you, we're terrible at messaging. We've got to get better at telling people what we're doing and what we're stopping and what we're working on. And And frankly, I'm frustrated. And I sit there and go, oh, what was that? And I'll go, that's a glacier that just ran by Congress. I mean, that's how slow we are. And it's by history and tradition. And we follow these antiquated paths of passing legislation, and they just got to change. We got to quit worrying about staff who is in bed, literally and figuratively, with our lobbyists, and start doing what the people have told us to do. Because President Trump won with a mandate. Congress did not. We're one flu season away from losing the majority. We're 3 ahead or something like that. And the reason we're not more ahead is because we ran on weak policies and not strength of America. President Trump ran on the strengths of America and what America needs to have. And I'm afraid some of my colleagues ran on what the lobbyists want, and that's why we've got some weak sisters in Congress. But I think that's fixing to change. I think America is going to wake up, and they're going to start putting the heat on us as representatives and telling us to pass Trump's agenda. We have got to codify these bills that come out. NPR needs to be cut off. Public television, cut them off. And we're not saying we're against we're not against the First Amendment. Now, I love the First Amendment. They can say whatever they want to, but dadgum, my tax dollars don't need to be sponsoring a bunch of Marxist agenda that I know everybody thinks I'm picking my ear. I'm putting my hearing aids. They keep popping out of my ears here.
No.
So anyway, but we've got to start pushing it. In the next 100 days, we've got to start endorsing President Trump's policies and getting them over to the Senate. I don't care if they're going to pass it or not. And if Republicans don't want to vote for it, we need to let people know how they're going to vote. We need to get some guts and show and be held accountable. And that's the way you do it. You put bills up.
Great advice.
Congressman, before we let you go, President Trump fights wars on many different fronts. He fights Democrats on Capitol Hill, even sometimes some Republicans, and he fights the media. But I'm seeing a different media warfare happening right now. Of course, Monday, President Trump and his administration put up those posters on the White House lawn, and they are strategically placed right in front of the tent. So it doesn't matter if you're ABC or CBS or CNN and you don't want to cover it, you are forced to because it's literally in the shot of your host. You've also got President Trump in this interview with ABC kind of verbally manhandling the host who was trying to assert that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was not a member of MS-13, even though the symbols are tattooed on his knuckles. Is President Trump winning the media warfare this time around?
I think he is, and I think that's why you're seeing the numbers drop. Amanda, it's astute of both y'all. You both made some really good points tonight. But yeah, I think that's why media numbers are dropping from your so-called legacy media groups, and that's why I think folks like yourself are busting at the seams. And I'm out in public. It used to be when I was getting blistered, and I've got to go. But I apologize. I got to go give a speech. But that's why you're seeing the legacy media deteriorate out of control, and even some of our local news medias when they go woke, go broke. America's sick of it. One thing they did during the civil rights. They did a lot of great things, but during civil rights, they cast their dollar votes. You watch these TV shows and these national shows, and they're selling a truck or a car. You call that dealership and say, hey, I'm not buying any more from y'all. Nothing personal against you, but it is against your corporation that's sponsoring this garbage. And the same goes for what's on your alls. You ought to start patronizing the people that are on there. And that's why America, that casting your dollar votes is something they need to do. We need to start doing and paying attention, because y'all are doing the Lord's work, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you, sir.
As are you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Scoot off to the floor. Thank you very much.
Ma'am.
All right, everybody. That was Congressman Tim Burchett from the great state of Florida. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to hit it on the other side.
Hey, folks, what if I told you your retirement could vanish overnight? Now, that's not fear-mongering. It's a warning, because right now our government is over $37 trillion in debt. The dollar is weakening, inflation is eating away your savings, and while most Americans are stuck watching the headlines, the smart money is already moving. Big banks around the world, well, they're dumping dollars and buying gold like never before. They know what's coming, a potential dollar reset that could crush the value of everything you've worked so hard for. That's why American Alternative Assets created a free wealth protection guide to help you protect what you've earned with time-tested precious metals like gold and silver. Go to johnlikesgold.com or call 1-855-GOLD-340. That's 855-GOLD-340 to get your guide right now. That's 855-465-3340 if you don't want to do the spelling. Don't wait for a financial crisis to start protecting your future. Be early, be ready, be protected. Remember, go to johnlikesgold.com or call 855-GOLD-340. That's 855-GOLD-340 to get your free guide right now. Welcome back, America. Quick programming note: if President Trump comes out to announce that Ukraine deal, we're going to go break away to it. But until then, we want to have a good conversation. The question I hear all over the country when I'm traveling: can Washington get its fiscal house in order? Well, our next guest, he's an expert at this. He kept Florida's fiscal house in order in one of the best ways. In fact, Florida is one of the best run financial states in America. Now he's brought that expertise to Congress. Joining us right now, the newest member of Congress, Congressman Jimmy Rochonis from the great state of Florida. Sir, good to have you on.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. Hey, Amanda.
Great to see you.
We are so glad you're in Washington town. Washington has needed you a long time. We got to get this budget under control. I know you've only been on the ground a couple of days, but tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing and what the art of possible is in Congress for shrinking the size of the government.
Yeah, look, we're going through the markups right now as we speak, and the Democrats are throwing all types of crazy ideas at us. So we have to sit there and go through the motions and vote down all this ridiculousness as they're trying to just drag things out and provoke a fight. But at the end of the day, we were sent up by the voters to save this country. And I'm proud to say, yeah, Florida is the best fiscal health we've ever been in the history of our state. And we're going to continue to bring that type of attitude with the message to the U.S. voters that we know you spend your money better than Washington, D.C. does.
Amen.
Sir, when you served as CFO for the state of Florida, I imagine anytime someone new steps into that position, there's some cleanup to do from the last administration. But with that compared to what you see on Capitol Hill, I mean, are we talking apples to apples or something very, very different?
You know, Mike Johnson has got his hands full. You've got the president who just won an incredible election, sending the message back to Washington that I want no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. The House is committed, as is the Senate, to have at least $1.5 trillion in cuts. And now we're hearing more out of the Senate that they might want more. So all these moving parts are big targets. So look, we've got to bring this in for a landing, but it's not going to be easy. And some of these desires of the way we did things in the past just can't be the priority right now. The election in November was a message, and we all need to listen to it, and we need to follow exactly why the voters elected a majority in both chambers and sent the message of bringing Donald Trump back to the White House.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Heed the American people, there's no doubt. So I want to talk a little bit about one of the debates that probably is going to end up in the Supreme Court soon, but it could also be settled by Congress before them. And that is, when Congress appropriates money, is that a floor or is that a ceiling? And I wonder if in some of these discussions, as Congress sets spending amounts, whether they would give the president the flexibility. If he can get the job done with less money, give the money back, we'd be fine with that. I know there's going to be a case working its way through the courts that are going to attest that, but members of Congress could set this message as well, right?
Absolutely. We can set the terms on those appropriations. You know, and it's very frustrating. We see it sometimes in state government. You see it in local government. They call it use it or lose it money. So at the end of the fiscal year, these offices, these bureaucrats, these agencies, they spend money on stuff they don't need, because if they don't at least spend the same amount of money that fiscal year, the next year they're going to be cut. And I mean, it's asinine that we are having actually this discussion that when dollars aren't spent, what is wrong with incentivizing those dollars to go back to the voters, to the taxpayers, whether in the form of rebate or savings or just being a better steward of the taxpayers' dollars. So yeah, I think all that policy needs to be on the table, and Congress can do it right now if it wishes.
That's pretty awesome.
One of the important areas where it's not being cut is defense. This is an area that has languished under former President Joe Biden, but President Trump, you had the announcement of the F-47 development, and you represent a lot of service members in your area, in your district. When you look at how the president is maneuvering and bolstering the military and boosting morale, what does that mean to the people who voted for you?
Yeah, so Northwest Florida has the largest military presence of any congressional district in the nation. 5 installations are there. So was I excited when Pete Hegseth got tapped? Of course I was. The war fighters' morale was beat down. So here you've got President Trump willing to make those commitments and those investments for the next generation fighter that is going to give us the air superiority to be able to have the threat to know that we can defend whatever we need to defend. At the same time, you've got a leader put in place, and President Trump, I appreciate him doubling down on the leadership of Pete Hegseth, bringing this historic recruitment level to levels we haven't seen in years. So changing the attitude, the personality of the military, the wokeness, the DEI that we have for the last 4 years, it's going to be refreshing. But we also have a commander-in-chief that wants to make the investments too.
Yeah, so important. Well, sir, I know to many of your colleagues, you are a welcome voice that has arrived in Washington. We can't wait to see what mark you're going to leave on the budget and so many other things. Congratulations on joining Congress. Thanks for being with us today.
No, it's an honor to be with you. And if there's anything I can ever do, my door's always open.
We're going to take you up on that, sir. Thanks so much. What a great honor. What a great conversation. What a smart guy. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we got to think about this. With fluctuating markets, how can you protect yourself? It's a kind of crazy topsy-turvy roller coaster time in the markets. We got a good idea. It's a 4-letter word, G-O-L-D. We'll talk about that next, right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. We have seen a lot of financial ups and downs in the last few weeks, but what you haven't heard much about is U.S. Treasuries and a possible risk emerging with them. Joining us now to explain is the CEO of American Alternative Assets, Shannon Davis. Shannon, thanks so much for being here.
Yes, of course. Happy Wednesdays.
Happy Wednesday. Okay, I think a lot of people expected maybe President Trump, well, yesterday morning when Scott Bessent had his press conference early at the White House, they thought maybe that's going to be some trade deal announcements. And then last night in Michigan, those didn't come, but I do think that they are in the offing. How is that going to impact the markets?
Well, we've got a trade war going on right now. There's no doubt about it. And, obviously it's the two big, the big head honcho, China and America. But more importantly, what it's creating is the R word, recession. I was just talking about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. These trade wars are tightening, companies' budgets because they can't afford to pay these tariffs that are coming. And it's becoming a problem, and we're starting to see the economy slide into a recession, which no one's paying attention to. It's cracking sector by sector, region by region, and the odds are shifting that we're going to have a recession based on trade wars. And we're seeing it now with our unemployment. 20,000 jobs UPS is cutting. And what I thought was interesting about that, it was because of the volume of Amazon no longer, having the volume to utilize UPS. As you guys know, they work with them.
Yeah, listen, we had the economic report this morning, 3% contraction in the economy. A second quarter like that would be a recession. In that moment, a lot of things are going to happen. First, you got a lot of overvalued companies on Wall Street. They've been riding higher than their revenues ever justified. Recession contracts. You're sitting there, you got your retirement portfolio and your investment portfolio. What is a smart strategy, and how does precious metals help hedge the bet a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. We talked about this last time we had an opportunity to chat. And again, we are seeing very similar things that we saw in 2008.
Yep.
And when it comes to your retirement, 401k, IRA, whether that's a traditional, a Roth, a TSP, which is a federally funded retirement account, you have the ability to make a lateral move into what's called a self-directed IRA. and reposition those dollars, right? This is monopoly money at this point with how much we printed, $37 trillion. This is absolute monopoly money. Gold and silver are fundamentally sound. It's real money with no counterparty risk. So you can move those dollars that aren't worth very much today, that can go away very soon. Central bank digital currency is happening. Those dollars you can move into gold and silver and hold those physical assets in a retirement account. So it's about putting a hedge in place, because if you have a proper hedge in place of something that's adverse to inflation or the dollar failing, like gold and silver, so when the dollar goes down and inflation goes up, so do gold and silver. So it's a hedge against the correction we're seeing in the market. And I just read a report before we even got on this call together that the S&P, some are saying the S&P will correct by 40%. You don't want to be in that market. You want to be in gold and silver. You can always liquidate and go back. And that's what we're helping many, many Americans do, is reposition their dollars, not all of them, just some of them, to get a proper insurance plan in place for your money, just like you do for your car, your life, and your house.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's a big correction. I want to ask you about the precious metals specifically, because there are some folks out there who like to actually have it in their possession. They want to put it in a safe, stuff it under the mattress, whatever means of concealing it that they can. Some people don't necessarily want that. They want it somewhere else that they consider to be safer. Tell us about how that works at your company.
Correct. Well, a lot of people do like that at home, in their coffee can, in a safe. They've got more lead than most people, some of our clients. But for those that aren't looking to store it at home, one of the safest places on the planet is a depository. Delaware Depository, DDSC, look into it. Everybody knows who it is. If you don't, just look them up. This is an international facility that gives you the ability to store your metals in a military-graded vault, armed guards, and it's insured through Lloyd's of London. So you couldn't store it in a better place. It's yours. This is a free and clear entity. And again, it's an international facility. I mean, this is where COMEX stores their metals. So it's a part of the actual process of rolling your money into a self-directed IRA, tax deferred and penalty free, by the way, and stored at a depository to stay tax deferred and penalty free. So there's no safer place than that. And that's where their metals would be held.
It's pretty awesome. You make things easy. You've got great guides, and we're going to get that in a second. I want to ask one thing, because I'm hearing more and more concern about hedge funds in their stability, and then what the government would do if the hedge funds suddenly had a crisis. Walk us through what you're seeing, because I think you explain it better than anyone I've heard it recently.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get super technical, but there's something called derivative contracts that are used in the equities market. And this is just another way of leveraging debt, monopoly money. And a lot of those contracts are getting called, or they're losing money. And so these hedge funds are hemorrhaging losses. And so as they continue to hemorrhage losses, where a bulk of our money in the equities market is held, and this is where the majority of the money's held. And so they're having some issues with the contracts that they're holding and the stock positions that are in these hedge funds. And they're going to need some help potentially, from what we're hearing, in terms of a bailout. And if that happens, all heck's going to break loose.
Yeah. And people are going to need some stability, that's for
Storm
sure. Shannon
clouds on the
Davis.
horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And everybody, if you want to learn more about them, go to johnlikesgold.com.
I do. Yeah.
Or call 855-GOLD-340 to get your free guide now. Again, that's 855-465-3340, or go to johnlikesgold.com. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on the other side.
What a great conversation.
Welcome back, everybody, to our final segment of the show. We want to tease a special event that's going to be happening the next few nights, but first let's get to a few news stories. A derecho plowing through Pittsburgh. I think about 200,000 power outages. They are obviously working to restore that, but you were just describing to me you were in one time.
I was just a little south of Pittsburgh. We were traveling back from Wisconsin. We were about to hit the hotel at the Hampton Inn, and we were on the highway, and the derechos are just straight winds. They're like 100, 120 mile an hour straight winds coming at you. everything, hail, rain goes completely horizontal, and they just rip the top off of roofs. They rip the top off of buildings. They rip wires right off any poles that are on. It's an intense wind, and it just travels down the road. The second you're out of it, it's gone. It's not like a tornado or something, but it is an extraordinary thing to have experienced. My wife and I were really shocked by its force, and it often takes a couple days for these to get repaired. It's a pretty intense thing. So we're wishing the best for folks in Pittsburgh and all of Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. All right, on the economy, President Trump, you know, I think he is more hesitant these days to use the stock market as a gauge of an economy because he learned the hard way that it's not necessarily the best predictor, but he has said to just be patient on the economy. Yeah. He predicts that there is going to be a boom like no other, and I know you talked about earlier in the show that the second 100 days, that's what's going to kind of set the arc for his presidency.
You did a great job telling us what that agenda is, too. You had a great story the other day. Listen, the first 100 days were about speed and just signaling change and creating the low-hanging fruit, but the big decisions that will change the course of this country, create a Trump doctrine, a Trump legacy of epic proportions, will live or die in the next 100 days. They've got to get tax cuts redone. They've got to get some trade deals. If the trade deals start happening, the markets are going to go wild. And they've got to also cut the size of government to take pressure off of inflation. Right now, the difference between the prime rate and lending rates is growing. That doesn't make sense, except that people are worried. And you heard Shannon Lassing talk about Standard & Poor's and S&P. People really worried about this overvaluation. That hedge fund thing is a very real thing too. So Congress better get its derriere in action because it's a very important partner on this. That big, beautiful bill has to get done by July 4th or you're going to see panic across the world, not just in America.
Yeah. Speaking of panic, but on a slightly more humorous note, guys, can you scroll up to the details about the gorilla story because we didn't want John to see this.
Get on gorillas. Wait a
we
second.
didn't want John to see this topic before we hit it.
Succeeded. Good job.
So there is this question that is going viral around social media. Who would win versus 100 unarmed men?
Right.
So no rocks, no swords, no arrows, no nothing, versus a silverback gorilla.
Wow. We're going to go with the men.
I would too. Yeah.
This is just an unfair advantage. 100.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe 2 or 3. I'd be a little worried. I might
And
be
I gotta
betting on
say,
the
you can
silverback.
afford some casualties with 100 men.
That's right. Yeah, you can throw a couple in there. Good thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not me. I don't want to be in the front line. So yeah, that one. So.
No, it's been amazing to see the diversity of both informed and uninformed opinions.
So how's it trending? Who's winning?
From what I've seen, it's humans. It's 100 men.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably
I think it makes
reasonable.
sense. Common sense.
Yeah. Okay, another topic, the U.S. government has denied eavesdropping on United Healthcare CEO murder suspect Luigi Mangioni's recorded jailhouse calls in a Monday court filing after his defense attorneys claimed federal officials shared his calls with the New York County Attorney's Office. This is such an ugly case from start to finish, John.
Yeah, and also the people who think that what Mangione did was justified in some way makes it all the more uglier. That sentiment really is frightening and scary and poisonous. Tomorrow we're going to do something special. Actually for 2 days we're going to do something special. The American Border Story Project is an extraordinary group. They kept the true stories of the border alive when the propaganda media were giving us different. Tomorrow night, for the first time ever, here on Real America's Voice, just the news, Real America's Voice, the American Border Story Project. We're going to give out the first American Border Hero Awards. Tom Homan, we're going to give away one now, but there's a lot of other surprises in there. People you know might not know. 21 families who lost loved ones in the Biden era are going to be here. We're going to have scholarships in the names of honored people. This is probably the most exciting thing I've been involved with as a journalist in a long time. We can never forget, just like 9/11, we can't let future generations forget what happened during these 4 years of insanity. And tomorrow night is the beginning of that. You're going to get to meet Nicole Kiprian, who runs the American Border Story Project. It's a great group, a great night, 2 great nights actually.
I'm looking forward to it because, as you know, before you and I teamed up to start our TV show back in 2022. Oh my gosh, was that 3 years ago?
3 years
Holy
ago.
smokes ago. But before that, I was out at the border a lot with Ben Berquam, and I learned so much from him, and I learned so much from officials at the border. And I'm looking forward to this because I'm going to actually get a reunion with not only some of the sheriffs and border officials, but some of the families too.
That's pretty
some of
awesome.
these families who lost people even before the Biden administration, and they have been speaking out about it for so long. And you know, it is so important to honor the men and women who stand guard at our border. border and the people who support them, like Borders are Tom Homan and the president, but also these families who, so many of them have been on the front line.
Man, this network covered the border like no one else. And when you get a Ben Bergquam and all the time that Rob Sig and Parker Siv gave to the border when others ignored it, it's the perfect network to have this award show on tomorrow.
It is.
I'm excited.
And even some of the road guys who were with us when we were at the border are going to be here. So it's going to be like a family reunion for them as well. It's going to be a really wonderful night. That's going to be tomorrow night and Friday night, so make sure you tune in.